Good morning, passengers. Welcome to Martel Air. My name's Amanda, and I'll be your pilot for today. We're just beginning boarding for flight number 19 from the Gold Coast to Bundaberg, so grab your seats while I finish up the last steps of the pre-flight inspections of this Cessna Grand Caravan, the pride of the Martel Air fleet. Before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspection complete. Parking brake handle set. Electrical system switches off. Ignition switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Bleed air heat switch off. Power lever idle. Prop RPM max. Fuel condition lever cut off. Fuel shut off knob verify fully in. Check. Battery switch on. Cabin lights on. Cockpit lighting set. Wing flap position up. No smoking light on. Before engine start checklist complete. Good morning, passengers. The weather today is nice and sunny, and we'll be cruising at an altitude of about 8,000 feet, flying over Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, and the island of K'gari en route. Your cabin crew today is me, assisted as always by my excellent co-pilot, Wing Commander Lamington. And your emergency exits are located to the back of the cabin where you entered the plane. I also have a door up here by me, and if you see me leave, please follow me quickly. Our in-flight catering services are provided by our wonderful passengers, so I hope you pack something interesting. We also have a Ko-fi machine in the back for those who'd like to support the channel, and the link to that is in the description of the video. Engine start checklist. Battery switch on. Beacon light on. Avionics 1 on. Bus volts check. Emergency power lever normal. Inertial separator bypass. EIS readings check. Propeller area clear. Fuel boost switch on. Fuel boost on shown check. Fuel pressure low not shown check. Fuel flow 0 check. Starter switch start. Ignition on shown check. Oil PSI check. NG stable. Fuel condition lever flow idle. Fuel flow in expected range check. NG climbing. NG stable. Starter switch off. EIS readings check. Generator load check. Generator off not shown check. Battery amps positive check. Fuel boost switch to normal. Avionics 2 on. and nav lights on. Engine start checklist complete. We're now ready for departure, so please fasten your seatbelts and turn off your devices, apart from those used to watch this stream. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Before departure taxi checklist. Taxi lights on. Seatbelt lights on. Taxi clearance. Coolangatta Ground, Martel 19 with information hotel. Request taxi to the active runway, north departure. Taxi to and hold short, runway 14 using taxiway Golf Charlie, Martel 19. Taxi clearance check. Nav source set. Prop RPM minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Inertial separator bypass. And parking brake handle off. Before departure taxi checklist complete. And now we check that we're not going to taxi into anyone. That's clear that way. There we go. And that's looking clear that way. Lovely. Okay. Engine into reverse, and ease off the brakes. And there's our reversing out of the parking. Looks like we have some lovely flying weather today, which is a bit more in character than the flight into, I think it was Newcastle Williamtown, where we flew into an absolutely dreadful icy storm, but we're back to blue skies, as is a bit more normal. Some pigeons, some ground personnel who'd better watch what they're doing. And we've got an interesting mix of small commercial and larger commercial planes here. That one's got some spice to it. And then as we cross over, we can see the actual commercial terminal in front of us. Being a Cessna Caravan, of course, we take the general aviation parking, not the airline gates, because you cannot connect a jetway to this thing. It would just miss directly over the top. It would be hilarious. And yes, for today's flight we will be continuing north up the Queensland coast over some of the most famous and popular beaches in Australia, and then getting up into the what is essentially the capital of the sugarcane growing region, which is actually responsible for what Bundaberg is most famous for. And it's always delightful to see some of the things that Bundaberg is famous for actually getting attention overseas. I believe one of them is a favourite of Adam Savage, which was a delightful little surprise. And of course the joy of unfamiliar airports is just working out what places I need to be keeping an eye out for and what places we are actually making our way towards. And of course paying a lot of attention to any of these taxiway signs that are red instead of yellow and black, because if they are red, they are not taxiway signs, they're runway signs, and you don't go onto the runway unless you really mean it. But luckily it's looking like we've got a fairly low traffic sort of day at the airport. While I was doing the pre-flight inspections and getting ready for the stream, we had a passenger jet taking off, which was ridiculously loud, as they always are. So I'm kind of glad that we got that out of the way before we had the boarding outside the plane, because hearing protection is your friend when those things are around. In fact, if you want some of the best earmuffs, get the ones designed for flight line personnel, because they literally block out a jet engine. Okay, before takeoff checklist. Parking brake set. Altimeter QNH set. Standby flight instruments check. Fuel boost switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Fuel shut-off knob verify fully in check. Standby alt power on. Anti-ice system. It is 19 degrees outside. We will not be requiring the anti-ice systems. Inertial separator handle normal. Autopilot setup. Altitude bug set to initial cruising altitude. And of course the scroll wheel. So altitude set. Flight level change mode engaged. Speed set to VY. Heading mode engaged. Heading set for runway heading. And bank mode engaged. Autopilot set up. The other planes in my current setup are simulator generated ones based on various AI, the old meaning of AI before it got taken over by the generative AI movement. There are multiplayer options, but I don't have that switched on because I would be terrified about what that would do on stream, and also I'm not much of a multiplayer gamer. But yes, in my setup they are AI planes generated by the simulator with some extra mods making it a little more realistic. Although for some reason it's it's decided to populate my game with American Airlines. I get United a lot, which is very weird when you're at Canberra Airport and everything is United and Delta. Oh, and there's also some setup in where it's actually taking live traffic from the publicly available flight tracking stuff and just inserting that into the sim. So you can have, one of the things that I have going on a lot of the time is just live real-world traffic inserted into the simulator. Technology is ridiculous. Okay, nav source set. Transponder on Alt. Flaps to takeoff position. Takeoff clearance. Bungata Tower, Martel 19, holding short runway 14, ready for departure to the north. Clear for takeoff runway 14, Martel 19. Takeoff clearance check. Strobe lights on. Landing lights on. Seatbelt lights on. Parking brake release. Fuel condition high idle. RPM max. Before takeoff checklist complete. Wing Commander Lamington, will you verify? Thank you. Okay. And onto the runway we go. And yes, the fact that you can get the real world traffic loaded into Flight Sim is one of my favourite ridiculous facts about the future. The fact that you can just do that for free and it actually works fairly well. It's we've come a long way from Flight Sim 95 with pixels the size of this cockpit. Okay, advancing the power to takeoff thrust. Not overstressing the engine and rotate. Oof, wants to pop into the sky today. Martel 19, cleared to continue north departure, acknowledged. Aiming to hold that VX best climb speed for a little bit. And we're clear of obstacles, so flaps up. Start our turn to get to the north now that we're actually airborne nice and smoothly. So since we took off into the south, we are currently over New South Wales. And this little headland here and the town that it's in are Tweed Heads. Going to 123.5 of Martel 19. Brisbane approach, Martel 19, type Cessna Caravan, 3 miles southeast of Bundaberg, 2,800 feet, request clearance to transition Charlie airspace. Squawk 5054, Martel 19. Cleared through Charlie airspace, Martel 19. Chatter going on. Okay, Cruise climb checklist. Anti-ice not required. Inertial separator normal. Airspeed is set to VY. Prop RPM. Let's go for 1850. Power lever is set. IGT range, check. So I've been doing some double checking about the local geography just because this whole area is not exactly my usual haunt. So I think on the flight in I identified this cluster of many tall buildings as Brisbane, but that is in fact the centre of the city of the Gold Coast, and all of this is just more Gold Coast, this entire outside arc. We've got some islands up ahead just at the end of the arc, and that's where we get to finding Brisbane itself. So yes, the Gold Coast just kind of blurs into Tweed Heads, and it's just all beach. There's so much beach. The idea of having two, major city centres with skyscrapers so close together is a little ridiculous to me, but the way that Gold Coast's city centre is just stretched out along the beach is kind of fitting. It's kind of fun. Who needs a cluster when you've got beach? Outside air temperature dropping below 4, so let's get the pitot-static and install heat on, just in case. 5 degrees is in fact our decision point for that, and since it's 19 on the ground, didn't need it down there. And yes, the fascinatingly wet geography of the Gold Coast, which is quite clearly, at least partially, well, we could sell houses on the water for more. What if we dug more water? So, if you've got a boat and don't mind navigating water highways to get out, some interesting little suburbs there. I shudder to think what the property prices would be like, but I shudder to think what the property prices would be like everywhere. Okay, and we are reaching our cruising altitude, so seatbelt light off, anti-ice system on, inertial separator normal, power lever set for 87% as we level off, and prop RPM set for 1750. The fuel balance check, and engine temperature range very much check. this big bit of mostly sand just here is South Stradbroke Island, which is the first bit of the continuation of this big sandy arc that is the Gold Coast. And just north of that, reaching out to the tip of the arc, is North Stradbroke Island. I know, shocking development. That the thing north of South Stradbroke Island might be North Stradbroke Island. And then there are many more islands whose names I have not written down in detail because there's far too many of them. Look at them all. But we'll be taking our tour up along the coast as we continue our flight around the entire coast of Australia. And we'll be flying over the world's largest sand island, which is an interesting achievement. So much of the coastline in southern and central Queensland is just where all the sand from the Pacific keeps washing up. So you get huge flat bits that are sand with trees on, or sand without trees on, or sand with water on, which is also called rivers and lakes and shallow sea. But it's just sand with something on, or sand with nothing on, or sand with wet. I believe that the Stradbroke Islands are also sand, which, I mean, the bits of them we can see certainly are because they are flat and in the area that is all sand. But yes, I have been up to this sort of area in real life, but no further north, so we're starting to get into unfamiliar territory for me, which is going to be interesting. So making my pre-stream research about where we're even going that little bit more important. Such as, you know, my mistaking Gold Coast for Brisbane just because, oh look, there's where the tall buildings are. But, you know, they are apparently just far enough apart to count as two different cities. Going to 130.4 Martel 19. Goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 19, entering your airspace at 8,000 feet. That is lovely, absolutely clear skies. Well, not absolutely clear, but clear enough that you can see anything coming, which is a useful little feature. And with Commander Lamington, as always, watching the instruments for me, making sure I don't get too distracted and fly somewhere we're not supposed to go or do something equally ridiculous. Perfectly crosswind of 18 knots, which is a little bit spicy depending on the sort of plane we're flying, but luckily as we're not trying to get near the ground, the crosswind doesn't bother us too much. It's only when you're trying to do things relative to the ground rather than relative to the air that crosswind even matters. Going to 123.5 Martel 19. And of course we're getting into the rapidly changing little airspaces. Brisbane approach, Martel 19, entering your airspace 8,000 feet. have the lovely North Stradbroke Island with all of its sandy sand. Let's zoom that map out a little bit. And it is in this bay, the next bay along from the Gold Coast, which I'm actually not sure if that up counts as a bay, but anyway. It is in this bay that we find Brisbane. So this is Moreton Bay, and the island we can see just past North Stradbroke Island is Moreton Island, which is another sand island and most of the shelter for Moreton Bay and Brisbane, which is a delightful little thing. And I always love the thing where you get the lovely smooth curves of the island on the ocean side, facing out into, we are officially getting into the Coral Sea as part of the Pacific Ocean, which is one of those names that you'll mostly only hear if you're doing a lot of World War II history. And looking at the place names around Northern Australia, especially island names, seas, coast, island chains as well, you realise just how close World War II came to Australia. One of the biggest naval battles, and most consequential, was the Battle of the Coral Sea. Yeah, we're getting into the edge of the Coral Sea just here. And all of the island hopping campaign was, I mean, a little far from here as far as this plane goes, but, you know, getting into the Solomon Islands, which are kind of almost directly north of us here across the other side of the Coral Sea, is, you know, where some of the biggest bits of fighting in the Pacific happened. Which, whenever they're talking about it in history stuff, they're talking about them as these very distant places that are so far away, because they're talking from an American perspective. And then you look at them from the Australian perspective, and yeah, the Solomon Island chain essentially ends at Papua New Guinea, which at the time was Australian territory and is like a canoe distance away from the tip of Australia. Oh yeah, the way that it's made to feel so very over there is fascinating when you look at it from the Australian perspective. Like, you get the Kokoda track as the only thing that felt really close to Australia. But the Bismarck Archipelago and the Solomon Island Archipelago, which are the things directly to the east, a canoe trip away from Papua New Guinea, is where you have Iron Bottom Sound and Rabaul and Bougainville Island and so many places that show up mostly just in the history of World War II stuff, in at least in sources outside of local to the area. But yeah, a lot of the time of the Pacific War was spent in the Solomons. So, you know, at some point, if I was going to be doing caribou flights over the Pacific, I might just do, you know, tour of the World War II battlefields and how close they actually are to Australia. And here we have Brisbane. This one is Brisbane and not Gold Coast. I know, because I have several mapping programs open little nav map, which is giving us the map down in the corner of the stream. And I've also got Google Maps open just because there's a lot of navigation happening. And yes, the islands around here are many and of ridiculous names sometimes. A little bit of turbulence there. So this one just here, the little one, is Peel Island. No idea why it's called that, probably named after someone. This one over here, much closer to the built-up part. Apparently Coochie Mudlow, which I can only assume is an Aboriginal name, but translates weirdly into modern English. Let's not dwell. And lovely bits of detail of the shallow waters and sandbars here, which is going to be absolutely dreadful if you're trying to get an actual ship through there. Luckily we're flying over it. But yes, I am just kind of delighting in the many ridiculous names of islands around here. Yes, I was not expecting to get distracted by all of the World War II history stuff, but that will be a thing as we get further north. I'm not planning a trip into Papua New Guinea on this circuit around the coast, just because it's already going to be 30-something streams long last time I did the maths. If we're doing one-ish hour streams, like, one-ish hour flights, trying to get it all the way, up through Papua New Guinea will probably add another 10-ish streams. So, we'll do that on a future flight. A future tour after the big circumnavigation. This island here is Morton Island, and the little baby one just off its coast is Crab Island. And the most delightful one in this little selection that we have here, I think, has to be this little round one over here. It is clearly the most interesting... wrong button. It is clearly the most interesting island in all of Moreton Bay because it has the most fascinating name. Welcome to Mud Island. I can only assume that Mud Island is a tropical destination par excellence that is mud. I mean, given that every other island around here is sand, I suppose mud would be a distinguishing factor. And we also have Green Island, which is fairly green. We have St. Helena Island, which is not the St. Helena that Napoleon was exiled to. That would be weird. And Fisherman Island is the thing that looks kind of like a pier rather than a proper island. Or peninsula, not pier. Pier is the thing made of wood. It's not a jetty. And yes, the PNG flights do sound fun. I will have to work out how I'm going to do those. That might actually be one where I take the Caribou instead of the Caravan, just because it is such a fun plane for bush flights, and despite having a cargo capacity that could lift the Caravan, actually has a shorter landing distance because it is specifically made for small rural and battlefield airports, or airfields, or airstrips, or paddocks without a fence in the way. And I definitely do want to do some more Caribou flights. I will not be doing the part where I always fly back to Canberra before doing a Caribou flight from Canberra, just because that will, look, we'll say that I got a bus back to Canberra every time I want to take the Caribou out. I do think treating the Caribou as being based at Canberra will be a good approach overall, just like I'm treating the Fokker triplane as being based at Temora. And yeah, at some point I'll get back to Temora and do some more flights in the Fokker triplane. Not quite so air show and getting distracted and doing silly things. You know, we might do some sensible flights in it instead. But you know, having those 3 planes in the repertoire. But yeah, I think a Caribou cargo tour of Papua New Guinea and possibly out into the Solomon Islands at some point could be a really good side quest. And just doing some checks, flying along nicely. Engine's good. Engine power. Just that slight tweak. Prop RPM good. Engine temp is good. Fuel balance, fuel quantity, all good. And we're still flying along in smooth enough air. We don't need the seatbelt light on, although, as I've said on previous streams, if you're actually in a plane and the seatbelt light is switched off, you should probably keep your seatbelt on just in case anyway, because you never know when there will be a sudden bit of turbulence or somebody accidentally leaning against the controls because they fell asleep or some other emergency, and it's better to have the seatbelt just across your lap instead of being flung into the ceiling. And yes, I am definitely going to be concentrating a little bit more on getting my pre-flight notes more detailed. The longest ones ever that I've had were for the air show over Temora, just because I had so many things to keep note of and remember to do. And I think I haven't actually had the notes properly prepared since then, which is I think I just overdid it on those notes and made myself a little bit wary of them again. But we've got flight notes back just as a text window in the, one of the many things on my second monitor. And I've got 2 different chat streams, one the in-game air traffic control and one the stream and chat from YouTube, which the embedding it into the video seems to have been working well, so even when I do the copy across to a recording, we don't lose the chat stuff that I'm replying to, which is nice, because otherwise it will seem that I'm going mad more often than I am. It's interesting how many little technical fiddly things there are to fiddle with when you're doing a stream, not all of which were anticipated. And you can see how ridiculously many waypoints there are on the map, every one of those little blue triangles with a label. Some of them are utterly ridiculously named because you run out of 5-letter combinations. I can see Poodle, I can see Winky. On air traffic control just before, I saw somebody getting directed to Chook. We got Quiet. Many of them that I'm sure are abbreviations for things. But yeah, so all of these waypoints are how they plan navigation, especially for the flights that are going on instrument rules rather than the visual flight rules that we're on. Where visual flight rules, you do your own navigation and just kind of enjoy things, but above a certain size they don't let you do that anymore because it's not sensible. such fun things as double checking our compass alignment. That is showing 335 in the bit, and that is showing 336, so those are lined up nicely. And how that works is that this is a just purely magnetic compass that is disconnected from pretty much every system in the plane and is just magnetic and mechanical. And then we've got the other heading indicators, such as the one in the glass cockpit setup, and I don't believe our standby instrument cluster has that tracker, but on other planes we'll have it as mechanical. But so the inertial based systems, which is what the glass cockpit is using, can drift away from what the actual magnetic compass is showing over time. But the thing about the I'm going to head us over towards the coast a little more, that'll be more fun. The thing about this magnetic and mechanical compass is that when you're rolling the plane, those are essentially completely unreliable. Like, they will, like, magnetic compasses are only actually fully reliable when you hold them perfectly level. So on a ship you get these wonderful gyroscope and gimbal setups to hold your magnetic compass perfectly level. And on a plane, instead, you have a compass that is actually going by inertia rather than the magnetic field itself. And so yeah, it is essentially a gyroscope that's just remembering where north is. And that one will keep track of things much better while the plane is pitching and rolling and doing all of the things that planes love to do. But gyroscopes like to drift over time. So you also have this lovely magnetic compass here, so that every so often you can double check one against the other and make sure that your gyro compass hasn't drifted. And the reason you can do that in a plane specifically is that you can make the plane be flat and level and flying straight and smooth. In a boat, you don't have as much of an option about that, so you have the big rigs to get everything holding nice and level. But in the plane, we can just use the entire plane as that leveling system. So you wait until you're flying straight and level, then you do your compass checks. In the exceptionally fancy Garmin G1000 suite that we have here, those compass checks are not actually super needed, specifically because the backup to the inertial system in this is the GPS, which is also what's powering our map over here. This is just straight up a Garmin GPS. It's just one of the fancier ones that Garmin makes. This is not the little pocket thing that you might have had 15 years ago that will get you to within 100 meters and could be useful for bushwalking. But yeah, so when I'm flying the Caribou, I have to do those compass checks a little bit more thoroughly, just purely on it has an actual inertial compass that can drift rather than the fancy GPS backed up thing. And as we get past Brisbane to the north, here we have Brisbane Island, which, if you need to get out of any legal situations, I cannot on the record recommend Brisbane Island, but that is a Brisbane is a reference to a TV show from probably 2000s. I cannot remember when Fat Pizza was on the air. It was very Australian and honestly very Melbourne. It's kind of wild. And yes, this sort of going slightly mad is what happens when we've got a long flight where I have a little less to say about the other actual things en route. And as the company in the chat varies and, you know, the various things that I have to share and explain shift around, it gets a little more interesting or a little more weird. But the sort of people who are going to get value out of the random nonsense that comes out of my mouth are the sort of people who are going to be staying in my audience. So, you know, I don't have to modify what I do to suit the audience. The audience will modify to suit what I do. And Wing Commander Langton, of course, keeping us company. I am so pleased with him being able to get him into the cockpit and modify it so that he's in every cockpit I fly with. When I'm doing 747 flights off stream just for, I feel like flying something a bit bigger, he also joins me in the 747 cockpit, and it's a hell of a sight. Just him sitting there happily watching the instruments in a 747. It's ridiculous. And as we get north of Brisbane Island, we've got Sunshine Coast. So many towns along this strip are named the something coast. They're not wrong, but we get it. It's a coast. It's a nice coast. It might be gold, it might be the colour of sunshine, but yeah. Going to 125.0, Martel 19, goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 19, entering your airspace 8,000 feet. Oh, the longer I do these streams, the more I start wishing for a third monitor. Like, I'm sitting here with two 27-inch monitors, and just thinking, a third would be nice, just kind of above the other two. Maybe, I don't think 4 would be sensible. I wouldn't have anywhere to put my camera and my lights for a start. But I've been known to do ridiculous things before, so, you know, maybe if I ever get a pair of 2K or 4K monitors to replace the Full HD that I'm on at the moment, maybe I keep one or both of these on as my stream monitoring window, because, you know, where I've got the entire left monitor is flight sim, the right monitor has flight sim's air traffic control, streaming stats and telling me that I'm still connected, how many viewers, stream chat, the OBS control window, so, you know, what's making all of the lovely everything but the flight sim window stuck around this, the camera feed, all of that, and actually uploading it to YouTube for me, all of that. Then we've got voice mod, which lets me do my air traffic control voice, and also contains the soundboard that contains Wing Commander Lamington's voice. And it's also got Little Nav Map, which is the flight sim integrated map that is, I mean, in this case primarily used for giving us the little mini-map display in the corner. I also use it for flight planning when I'm not on stream, because it has all of the airports that are in flight sim and lets me point at, you know, work out what's about one stream's worth of flight further along the coast. It's also got my pre-flight checklist, or my pre-stream checklist. Like, the pre-flight checklists are on here. The pre-stream checklists, like, you know, making sure all of the various programs are running properly and all the tests I need to do to make sure the stream's not going to break. That's a text document that's also on the right screen, and I've got my flight notes, and at the moment I've got Google Maps running more for, pulling up more references, because if I start doing things on little nav map, it will change what the minimap view on the stream looks like. And at some point, I'm sure I'll work out another thing to add to the stream, other than the frame, the camera, the minimap, and the chat. Just continually growing more and more complicated. Won't that be fun? It's been fascinating getting the streaming setup working. The green screen behind me, which you can't see because it is currently active as a green screen, cost $20 from Kmart, and then $10 of green polypop from Spotlight so that I could make it bigger. Oh, and $10 of PVC pipe to make a top bar that's a little wider. So essentially the Kmart green screen comes with a fairly reasonable piece of green, I think it was actually a knit polyester, in that proper green screen, bright green, and one of the types that doesn't show wrinkles, which is very useful. But it is a 2x1 meter screen, which, the way I've got my camera set up, there's no way I could have the framing I need without the edges showing at each side, which was just driving me mad. So I got a couple of 1 meter PVC pipes and a PVC pipe T-piece, drilled a hole in the middle of the T-piece so that I could replace the top bar. So the thing I got from Kmart, I'm not using the screen and I'm not using the top bar from it, but it is a tripod with a 2-point-something meter extendable pole with a screw mounting point on top of it. So, the pole and tripod is really useful and honestly worth the $20 of the entire kit. It also came with a couple of hand clamps to secure the green screen on. But I replaced it with a 2x2 meter square of green polypop, achieved by buying 4 meters and sewing it together along one edge and then splitting it. So turn 1x4 into 2x2, sew a tube along the top, put the PVC pipes in that, and put the PVC pipes on top of the pole. And so because I can pull the PVC pipes out of the top bar, it's still collapsible, and if I ever actually wanted to pack it down, especially for moving it, I can still pack it down into a fairly compact bundle. But yes, that was an interesting little process getting that set up. Going to 129.0, Martel 19, goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 19, entering your airspace at 8,000 feet. And then I've got a key light, which is here-ish, and you can kind of see how bright my hand is in that shot. And that is actually a LED bulb with Wi-Fi control, so that I can set a nice warm light for filming, despite the fact that I actually have all the lights in my house set very cool, because that's how I prefer it, but that also makes me look sick. So I have an app on my phone that controls all of the lighting for that, and also the film light over here, which is just filling out softening the shadows on this side. I've also just got the window there. Any places around this area that I want to visit, either sim or real? Let me see. So this will be Sunshine Coast, and we've got more of that lovely... we dug more water so that you can have beachfront properties for your boats. But, one of the things about Queensland is that it's all very warm. I'm not huge on warm. There's many places around here that I'd like to visit at some point, I guess, but not strongly. I'm not a huge traveller as it is. I mean, I'm sure I'll be getting through a whole bunch of these in the flight sim, just because there's a lot of places through here to fly. Especially as you go inland and there's almost nothing, you get some interesting tiny little airports. Oh look, we've got a not super large, but at least proper airport just there, which let's see here. Nope, I am zoomed too far out on the little nav map to see what airport that even is. Oh, I know which map I can check. YBSU. Okay, so we know that it's YBSU. Australia region, Brisbane, probably Sunshine. So that is just probably Sunshine Coast Airport. But let's go over to my airport charts page. Oh. Apparently they've changed the path for that. That's wild. Oh. Active as of Thursday. New charts document. Now I've got to find where the ones I use even are. Not that one, not that one. No. Sydney Gentle Flying Guide? No. Let's see. Huh. Interesting. That is... There we go. Fascinating. Apparently they changed the website address to when they did the new version of all of these files. And yes, the big advantage of flight sims weather and climate conditions is that the weather in the cockpit, as far as I'm concerned, is whatever I've got my heating set to at home. And if the plane is icing up, as it did a couple of flights ago, I don't actually have to deal with what the weather feels like. I can just imagine. Like it's, 3 degrees here because we're 8,000 feet up. But, that's not as much of a thing to worry about. And engine is still running fine. Temperature good, fuel levels good. Lovely. I was checking what YBSU. Yes, Sunshine Coast Airport is what that little one was. And yes, the airport charts file or website that I've got is actually the real life one, because Flight Sim is accurate enough that I can just use the actual real world airport charts for Flight Sim use. I find that slightly ridiculous in a delightful way. Switch, bleed air heat on, just to pull a little bit of that warm air from the engine into the cockpit. And of course the joy of all those little switches there is that they are behind the throttle cluster. Because of course they are. Oh, that's the most adorable little, possibly an airstrip that's just dirt. I need to look up what that is. Is that... Yeah, so that is YNSH. Noosa Heads. Noosa Heads tiny airstrip. How delightful. And yes, as might be implied by that, we have here Noosa and Noosa Heads, which is another one of those places that I have only ever really heard of in the context of place with beach. But unlike our tours around the southeast coast in Victoria and the south coast of New South Wales, not beach that I've been to. So, you know, unlike our tour of Turos and our flight along the entire length of 90 Mile Beach, I can't tell you much about Noosa other than the fact that it's one that shows up on the back of most cars that have a surfboard on them. And the thought occurs to me that at some point, when I do a super long stream, you know, possibly a 6-hour flight in the Caribou or something, I'm going to need to work out how inside the roleplay of the flights, or possibly just outside of it, I'm going to be able to do bathroom breaks. And I'm also going to need to not be drinking energy drink constantly, because that will have me requiring that more often. Honestly, I think just straight up pausing the game and putting up a little, you know, I've got my before and after stream screens that I can put up, and I think honestly for the 6-hour streams I may just go, we're not role playing this in a plane that doesn't have an autopilot. I'm just going to pause the game and put up this waiting screen for 2 minutes while I go and deal with things. The weird logistics when you start thinking about, oh yeah, I reckon I could burn an entire Saturday just doing a flight for, 6 hours. And if I ever decide to take this plane over to New Zealand, I'm going to be doing 3 of those in a row. Because at the speed this plane flies and with the range that it has, it's 3 flights to get from Australia to New Zealand, because you have to do a little bit of island hopping to even get there. And I think I worked out the plan would be from somewhere around Port Macquarie to Lord Howe Island, refuel and sleep. Norfolk Island, refuel and sleep, and then Auckland, because they're a bit far apart. And you can do that as a 4, 5, 6 hour flight in an airliner. I actually did Canberra to Auckland in a business jet the other day as one of my self-amusing off-stream flights, because I do actually fly flight sim outside of streaming sometimes. Shocking, I know. Video games not as performance art. And that was a solid 4 hours in a thing with autopilot. And if I'm doing long flights in the Caribou, which does not have autopilot, even a hold the wings level autopilot, while I can get it flying nice and straight and level and comfortable with all of the trim commands, it will take 1 errant gust of wind under one wing while I'm stepping away for 2 minutes to completely flip the plane over and crash. And unfortunately, Wing Commander Lamington does not really have the ability to grab the controls as much as we might like. I mean, there might be something in the flight sim settings somewhere that I haven't investigated that would actually let me set up co-pilot control. I think that's a thing that's at least partially built in. I would have to investigate that. If I can set it up, like I do not have the ability to animate him putting his paws on the yoke. That would be a bit beyond me. But if I can work out how to do that, then the bathroom break backup solution will be, in fact, Wing Commander Lamington take the yoke. But otherwise I'm going to just end up working out the pause button and just have a screen that shows up. And just we will deal with it that way. So the Caravan's range is not actually that small. I don't know how many are operating in Australia, but one of the biggest users, especially in the US, is actually FedEx. Going to 125.0, Martel 19, goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 19, entering your airspace, 8,000 feet. So it actually has a reasonably good range. Let me just go across to this window and pull up just the Textron/Cessna. So yeah, maximum range 912 nautical miles, useful load 3,532 pounds. So you know, it's not a massive range when you look at jet airliners. Also, I just tried to convert 912 nautical miles into kilometers, just for context. But nautical mile and nanometer both have the same abbreviation. I did not need to know how many kilometers in 900 nanometers. That's very silly. So, 912 nautical miles is 1,689 kilometers. So, that's actually a fairly good range. Like if you take off from Canberra, that will get you to, you know, most of the way across the Nullarbor. That is starting to get a bit of rocking, so attention passengers, they have just turned the seatbelt lights on. Please make sure you are strapped in. Yes, jetliner ranges are utterly ridiculous. But if you look at, you know, actual used in things measurements, if I was doing it in a single flight, I could get just short of Townsville from Canberra. And when you consider the amount of runway and also ground handling facilities that a jetliner will require, and then you compare it to this thing, which, you know, it can carry a decent amount of cargo if you're using the, like, so all of these seats can just be unbolted and taken out, and you can just fill that with cargo, and then you can fit a few hundred more kilos in the underslung cargo pod. So, yeah, the reason that FedEx uses so many of them is that for getting to smaller areas quickly, you can get it. Like, if you're looking at cargo as a big category, 3,500 pounds, which is transferring that out of Freedom units because you know, the plain stuff is written for Americans. That's 1,600 kilos. And if you're not looking at it as bulk cargo, but instead looking at it as mail, that's a lot that you can cram into one of these. and have it fly like if you take it to full cargo capacity, or not taking it to full range, just because like maximum cargo capacity plus maximum fuel tank capacity is more than its maximum rated takeoff weight, which is kind of wild. But this is how, like, you have to balance these things, and also making the plane heavier makes it fly less far. But yeah, you can carry a lot of mail to somewhere a lot smaller, and it's also quite an efficient, because it's a turboprop, so basically a jet engine, but you're using the spinny to turn a propeller instead of turning the more fans that blow air out the back. And those are reliable and fuel efficient. I mean, okay, so we're burning 350-ish pounds of fuel an hour at our cruise, which, is a lot of fuel, but it's a lot less than a jetliner. Oh, now, what area are we over now? Let's get back to that map. So that is the town of Tin Can Bay, which is interesting. And just here we have Rainbow Beach, seems appropriate. And there we have Kagari, or Gari, or one of a number of other pronunciations. And yeah, like so many packages, like these things are really good for people like FedEx. Like, I don't know that Australia Post has any. I would love them to. But yeah, like smaller airstrips, and if you look at it as a pretty solid, large bus, like if you think of the Toyota Coaster as the standard, small bus, this has got about the same seating capacity as one, and is honestly about the same size as one. And if you imagine filling one of those up with mail, then yeah. Going to 124.6 Martel 19. Brisbane Centre, Martel 19, type Cessna Caravan, 6 miles southeast of Yankee Romeo Bravo Bravo, 8,000 feet, entering your airspace. YRBB, which is YRBB. There are so many airports. Well, given that it is just on that Rainbow Beach, I'm going to guess that YRBB is Rainbow Beach. Yes, so here we have Kagari, or Gari, formerly known as Fraser Island, which is one of the big sticky out into the water loops, as are so everything along this stretch of the coastline. And it is the world's biggest sand island. So this entire island, all of its trees and its little hills and its little lakes, is just sand that has built up and built up and built up. And yes, as you might be able to tell from Kagari, so it's K''Gari. It is one of the places that has been switched over to the local Aboriginal name. I don't know off the top of my head which group that is. There are many, but yeah. So one of the largest. Well, it is the largest sand island, and it is like the association in my head for the former name of it is just. It's another one of those places that's beach, and you go there for beach. And given that it is the world's largest sand item, it is technically entirely beach. but we are getting a little bit closer to our destination in Bundaberg as we come up. So Kagari is one of the edges of Harvey Bay, and it's just across from the town called Harvey Bay. And again, we have some of these delightfully named little islands. And let me just... okay, so it is that one. And I am in fact going to make it so that we are flying over my favourite of those little islands there, using that pink pass on the map just as our general navigational guidance, but not sticking to it as gospel, because that is just what we've sketched out on the map. Yes, one of the things about sand islands is that if you get a stream going through it, it might, erode itself a little channel to be the stream, and if that happens to reach the other side of your little sandbank that's calling itself an island, then you get two islands. So you can see the this lovely little collection of what probably used to be connecting Kagari to the mainland, that is now a seemingly random collection of water, water, sand, sand, water, water, sand, sand, water, water, sand, water, tree. And so the islands we've got here, we've got Stewart Island, fairly normal, Dream Island, which is a delightful island whose name is not appearing on Google Maps. The Moonboom Islands. My brain wants to read that as Moonbeam, but it is, no, Moonboom. That is fascinating. We've got Garden Island and Tooth Island, which is ominous, but not as ominous as Slane Island. Round Bush Island. Thomas Island, another generic name. And my favourite, which is the one that is furthest away from us, basically barely separated from the mainland, New Island. One of these islands is just called New Island. Not Ireland or anything like that. Just Island. New Island. We've got so many islands here. Well, this one just got just enough water between it and the rest to be an island now. What do we call it? What do we call the new island? That'll do. New Island. And I am specifically trying to avoid mocking any of the place names that are Aboriginal, because Aboriginal languages are really cool and we need to study them and teach them more. And you get the most Australian names from that. But the European names for things. So here we've got, a while ago we had 90 Mile Beach, which was more than 90 miles long. This is 75 Mile Beach. That's a much more specific number and probably accurate. I'm not going to check. It is just the entire stretch of, yep, it's sure wet here. And yep, more beach. Oh look, some beach. Yes, looking at the... I need to remember to not get too distracted by going across the map and actually still pay attention to what is on the screen for people watching, not just me. And I think that is a tiny little airstrip there. RAI, yeah, that's actually showing up on my map as an airstrip. Fascinating. My mouse is being a little bit temperamental today, that's why that keeps going a bit weird. Although it is not one on the aerodrome charts website, so it is clearly just a tiny strip. Come to think of it, I don't think Gubbo Island that we did the Caribou flight to and from was on that list either, just being a little airstrip on an island. But you know, there's a place you could go in one of these planes to deliver packages. Engine's still looking good, fuel is looking good, air temps are looking good. Lovely. Oh, and it looks like there's actually 2 airstrips. No, 3. 3 airstrips on Kagari. That's fun. I suppose it is a fairly long island. One might say the largest sand island. Just out of curiosity. Tip to tip, it is 124 kilometres. Okay, so 75-mile beach cannot be 75 miles. Because the entire island is 77 and it doesn't go the entire length of the island. There we go. More lies exposed. Oh yes, the Great Barrier Reef. I was going to check on the official definitions of that. Okay, so pulling up the map of the Great Barrier Reef National Park, or Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, since it's not a national park if it's in the water. The southern edge of the officially defined marine park is just a shade north of Kagari. So we are getting to the southern edge of what is considered the Great Barrier Reef. So, next stream we will start getting into the flying over it and seeing how well Flight Sim does at modelling that from the air. And Kagari is actually one of the really useful things for finding your bearings when looking at a map, because you know, you see this lovely shape sticking straight out into the ocean that as we zoom out, except for the fact that we've got things over it, but you know, even zoomed out that far, you can see this lovely big hook out into the sea, so you can really use it for finding as a reference point on navigation and just looking at large maps. So the zoomed out map that shows me, you know, that I've honestly just pulled up off Wikipedia, but of, you know, where the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park starts, it is directly north of this 75 or 77 mile long hook shape sticking out into the ocean. And, you know, it's one of the good tests for how detailed the map you're looking at of, is Kagari pictured? And as we come across here, we get into some of those interesting named little islands that I was looking at. The big island here that looks to be covered in trees is Big Woody Island. The one just to the right of that, that's quite a bit smaller but still looks reasonably wooded, that is Little Woody Island. Feel free to giggle at that name as immaturely as possible. And there is one more island of notable name in this little strip. It doesn't seem to... Oh! Okay, these two little ones off the tip here. The larger one is Duck Island. I presume there are ducks there. And the tiny one that, you know, the top dot of the semicolon there is Picnic Island. Sounds delicious. And we are getting ever closer to our destination. And it looks like I've been going for an hour and a half now. That's... that would explain a few things. Yeah, it's fascinatingly easy to lose track of time while I'm rambling away doing an autism ADHD dump to camera and flying, but that is why we have... I do not set myself a maximum time limit for these streams other than my own endurance. Oh yeah, starting to run out of names. That's not hard. You've seen how many tiny islands and, like, the difference between an island and a sandbar is what the tide feels like some days. But yes, my favourite little one here that you can see between the coastline there of Torquay and Big Woody Island, that little one in the middle there, is Round Island. It's not even slightly round. It might have been at one point, it might be in the future, but it's currently not particularly round. Cartographers are liars. Now, as this flight is one where I do have an autopilot, I'm just going to do a little experimentation based on the previous discussions around if I can get it on autopilot and flying itself nicely on its own, I can possibly work out how to have a toilet break in the middle of a stream. And look, I am going to do one of those because I need to do one of those. So luckily on this one, as I have the autopilot holding us straight and level and the engine is sitting nicely, I can mute the camera, mute the mic, and be back in a couple of minutes. Okay, that is not what I was expecting for the new edition of content for this stream. But this is the joy of doing longer streams and the fact that I require beverages as I'm going. And we have just caught up enough for now to see Round Island in all of its not even slightly rounded glory. And the town that on Google Maps has about 7 different names that all want to show up equally prominently. So, you know, we've got Hervey Bay Airport, and Urangan with Urangan Pier, and Torquay, and Point Vernon, which is this bit out here sticking out like a point, and Wandana, Kawangan, Scarness, Pialba, Uraween, another Hervey Bay, Craignish. This place, like, I'm sure that at least one of those is the overall name and the rest are all suburbs or something. But Google Maps is showing them all to me with equal prominence because it likes it. What fun, what fun. And we glance down at our map here. We look to have another 18 minutes before we get to Bundaberg. And just making sure to at least somewhat keep track of the chat and the stream software, which is always fun, as I was rambling before about wanting a third monitor just to put the streaming software on. And yes, part of the point of the ramble about my streaming setup and equipment before was just that, so since I also work from home, my video camera setup, which is this exact setup, including the lights, not the green screen though, because Teams doesn't play well with that, so I don't bother. This is the only way that any of my co-workers ever see me. And investing in the streaming setup, or the video conferencing setup being that bit better, so, you know, the headset with a good mic and good speakers on it, and pink because I can get away with that, and the camera and the lighting setup and all this, because it is used for work, because every meeting I go to, this is how any of my co-workers ever see me. Welcome to the land of tax deductions. And yeah, so part of how I was able to start streaming was just, like, the only thing I actually bought specifically for streaming was the green screen. The rest is just, well, I already have this set up, so I might as well have some more fun with it. Like, when I bought and tax deducted them, I was not planning on streaming with them. But here we are. Okay, we are just about back on that nav path, so I'm just going to switch that over so that as we get onto the path, the plane will follow that automatically. And yeah, so, you know, I'm having some fun working out all of the little details of streaming. So one of the things from the start of this stream, which I don't know if you were there for, Emma, or if you came in after that, so I have set up I never know how to say the name of this service. Ko-fi, Ko-fi. Like, my brain wants to say Ko-fi because it's like JB Hi-Fi. And some people say Ko-fi, like Kofi Annan. But all of their imagery is around saying it like coffee. So I'm going for like a halfway pronunciation in the welcome aboard sort of script, the new version of the plane has a coffee machine in the back for in-flight catering reasons and those who'd like to support the script. So, you know, working out how to phrase that. And, you know, for the, if I need to do another little emergency run off to another room of the house, I am actually wondering if I start to set up like this as a streaming view for while we're on autopilot with Wing Commander Lamington monitoring everything. I think that could be a fun way to show Mandy's not here right now. Like, I might just save that so that I can go from my normal view to the Goodest Co-Pilot view. I think that might be my please hold Mandy is away, because, you know, over here we've got my view of the cockpit, and I think what I might have overwritten is the view from one of the passenger seats. I think that's what was previously in that, because I can, like, Flight Sim lets me move around the cockpit all sorts. So, you know, if I sneak over here, actually, let's pull out there. So, you know, I had something like this as one of the views so that you can see Wing Commander Lamington watching the controls, but I have overwritten the shortcut for that, and I think that will work well as the I think I'm going to be using that as the stream thumbnail for this episode. But yeah, I think that's the view I'm going to set it to if I ever have to disappear off, and I'll need to work out the same. Like, I'll need to work out what the trick I'm doing for the Caribou is, but if it's not pausing, it's going to be from just behind Wing Commander Lamington and his wonderful flight-worthy wings of ears. Look at him go. Very silly. And here we have Bundaberg coming up ahead of us on the map, and just random off in the distance, but that is always fun. One of the things I was expecting to ramble and chat about is the various drinks of Bundaberg, because there are two drinks companies that call themselves Bundaberg, because they're both based out of this town that is in the middle of the sugarcane area. And they are apparently completely unrelated brands other than geography. Because there is Bundy Rum, or Bundaberg Rum, the one with the polar bear for unclear reasons. And there is the Bundaberg Brewed Drinks Company, aka the ones who do the ginger beer and the sarsaparilla and the other things in those bottles with the really weird foil tearing lids that are essentially just glass stubbies but for soft drinks. Yeah, apparently those two companies are completely unrelated, other than they're both from Bundaberg and have named themselves after the town they're based in, starting in, unclear. And yes, Wing Commander Lamington is the goodest boy and the goodest co-pilot. And I love the fact that the animation is his tongue bouncing a little and the tip of the tail is going wiggly wiggly. Best flight sim mod ever. And they have just released an update to the Man's Best Friend avatar pack. So the previous round of updates added 6 different cats. So all the dogs in the pack are sitting up attentively, being the goodest co-pilots and pilots, because you can put them in either seat. But, so, you know, the previous round of updates added cats who are not watching the instruments or being attentive because they are cats. I'm sure we can all relate to the fact that they are... Like, I'm pretty sure they're awake, but they're not watching the instruments with dedication like Wing Commander Lamington is. But the new update has added one more. which, let me just pull up the page so that I get their name right. The newest avatar, which is spelt with AVITAR because I think aviation avatar sort of pun. The newest edition is Sunny, who is a duck. So, as of the new update, you can have 6 different cats, each of them with their own names, and essentially, I mean, the cats are all very similar, just different coats. The dogs are very, very varied. Let's see here. 21 different dogs. Each of them with their own names. Which I am using, of course, the Corgi, whose official name in the mod is Bagel. But following the tradition that Corgis go best with food names, he is Wing Commander Lamington. And I was doing the full name on the stream the other day. I really need to memorize his full name. Wing Commander Lamington Pavlova Vegemite Skymaster Martel. I think there's one extra thing missing in that, which would be embarrassing. Nope, that was it. It was the Skymaster that was trying to slip my brain. So yes, 3 foods, a cool extra name and surname, because of course Martel Air, of course he's Martel. And you in particular, Emma, know the other half of the story around that name, and also the airline livery. Because, you know, once you've got a good name and design, you may as well reuse it instead of coming up with a second thing. And we get into forest farms, which of course I don't know exactly what these farms are going to be, but a lot of them we're getting into sugarcane country, which is why Bundaberg has those 2 brands. Yeah, so Wing Commander Lamington Pavlova Vegemite Skymaster Martel is the Goodest Co-Pilot, and I have an ongoing project to try to modify the in-game model to give him a hat and collar, because I've got the 3D models all designed from scratch and textured and all this. It's just getting the actual imports to work. I'm going to keep poking at that. It shouldn't be as hard as it has been, but he deserves the adorable little hat I've designed for him. Goodest boy. And yes, before I discovered how to have co-pilot visible but pilot model not, I had to swap out the pilot model for... Often I actually had it as the black cat from the same mod pack, just because I'm never looking here, and the cat is smaller and sitting down nicely and just kind of chilling, because cat. And having the pilot avatar that I usually have set, which is, I mean, a modification of one of the default pilot avatars. So, you know, one of the things about Flight Sim 2020 is they added female pilots for once. And so I've modded one of those with 4K textures and modified the shirt to be gold, black with pink pilot stripes rather than white with gold stripes. At some point, so, you know, I have the specific one nice black collared shirt that I have for streaming because it stands out nicely against the branding color background and against my pasty skin, and, you know, doesn't require too much in the way of details. But at some point I really want to get one with the proper epaulette straps, and I will just make myself some, you know, hot pink or red wine colour. I think hot pink because the usual red wine colour that I like is basically what I've got for the branding colour. So, you know, that would just blur away. But I want to make myself some, you know, a proper pilot shirt with the epaulette stripes, just because, look, if I'm going to be role-playing this and dressing the part, I might as well have fun with it. That's the whole point. And since I have Mechanical Josephine, the embroidery machine, I can go nuts with it, really. And we are getting in towards Bundaberg Airport, so looks like we have a non-controlled airport, just a traffic channel. Let's see if I can get the airport without screwing up the mini-map. Nope. That did not go to plan. There. But I need to get the wind conditions, and it looks like we will be taking a runway 32. Okay. Attention passengers, we're now approaching Bundaberg, and we have the seatbelt lights on, which means I'd like you to fasten your seatbelts. Enjoy this riddle and more as we come in towards landing, and thank you again for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, approach checklist. Seatbelt lights on. Fuel tank selectors both on. Fuel condition high idle. Prop RPM max. Gently so that we don't overstress the engine. What's our distance? Yep, okay. Flaps to approach position. And landing lights on. Separator handle we will keep off for the moment. And let's get ourselves set up for that approach. Altitude we want... Okay, so it's basically a sea level airport, as we will be dealing with most of our way through this flight. So let's drop down to 2400, flight level change at 130 knots. And we start looking out the window for that airport. Aha! Okay, so we have in fact gotten closer than I thought we had. So instead of that, we will in fact do a direct overflight and do the pattern. This is what happens when I get to talking and thinking about cute outfits for both myself and the Goodest Co-Pilot. Also, the collar that I've designed for Wing Commander Lamington has 3 gold stripe, like metal pips on the collar, each one embossed with Goodest Boy, because it's what he deserves. So I have had to put that project on the back burner just because I was spending way too much time and energy on it. But someday he will have his hat and adorable collar. Like, I'm reasonably good as a digital artist. It's just getting it into flight sim that's given me problems. Bundaberg traffic. Martel 19 is entering traffic pattern for landing, currently descending through 3,700 feet, entering pattern for runway 32, about to overfly the runway and commence downwind. Okay, we do not want the start menu. Now this is the interesting stuff that happens when I get distracted and do not do all of my preparations correctly. But here we go with the overflight of the runway, and then we do a nice left turn to enter the traffic pattern. And there is the overflight. So reciprocal of 32 is 16. 16 plus 18 is 34. No. One of the things with flying things is working out, okay, what is 180 degrees off this other number, because runways are numbered by where they're, what heading they're on, rounded to 10 degrees and truncated. In America, if it's 0 something, they will not say the 0, but in the rest of the world we do. And honestly, runway like 04 sounds so much nicer than runway 4. And yes, this is how a tiny little country airport with no air traffic control services other than a traffic channel can have runways 14, 32, 25 and 07. Despite having, you know, one paved runway and one relatively grass runway. But we get some nice distance from the runway. We've got our landing lights on. We'll get our flaps down to landing position in a little bit. That's what G is. That's our glide speed. As we're not in any particular hurry, especially because I had that little break before, we can get a little bit more distance from the airport. It is a little bit bouncy, but this is why you've got your seatbelts on. So we get some distance from the airport. If I had been doing much more planned instead of VFR flights, then we would have come in from over here, but this is how it is, and it's often considered good practice in VFR flying to overfly the airfield and then enter the pattern rather than trying to do a straight in approach, just to make sure that anybody else in the area is keeping track of what's going on. And let's get ourselves to 1600. That sounds nice. And we will start a nice lazy turn towards the airport. Not using any of the automated procedures that would set us up on a GPS equivalent of a flight path, because we don't need to. I've been editing the control sensitivities a little bit, just because I wanted to. I have not actually tested those in flight yet, because I was doing those while setting up for the stream, so we'll see how that goes. And we want to make sure that we're coming around the airport not just pointed at the airport, but pointed along the runway. So we're going to, in fact, not set up direct for the airport just yet. So here we have distance to Bundaberg Airport, 6 nautical miles, and bearing 330. So we want to continue on our base leg, which is at 90 degrees to the runway, until that 330 is a bit more like 320, because we want... Actually, let's just pop off the autopilot, because now that we have the airport in sight nicely, we can see where the runway is. So we want to fly our base leg across here just until we're starting to line up with that. But we are drifting into our final. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 19 is on final runway 32 to land. Final approach checklist, seatbelt lights on, flaps to a landing position, autopilot off, lining up on the runway, switching off GPS CDI, switching off, lovely, and setting that heading to 320 just to give us a tracker. I get the impression that this runway is not actually 320 as a magnetic heading. This can happen because the magnetic pointers drift, and also, you know, when you're rounding things, it could be anywhere from 315 to 325. Okay, so the little tweaks I've done on the control sensitivity is definitely making this a little twitchier, but more responsive, which I think is what we want. A little bit of buffeting, 4-5 knot crosswinds, 1 or 2 knot headwind, which is better than a tailwind. Easing the speed back to about 85 knots. Confirm flaps are down. And yes, it is definitely a small airfield. We have a runway, we have some parking, lovely flashing green light because those are popular. We're a little bit high, but that's okay. I'm drifting back into my landing narration voice, which is lovely and calming, and is especially important for calming me. The puppy lights are still showing that we're a little bit high, but that's perfectly okay. We've got plenty of runway. I can see a long way between the 1,000-foot markers at each end, so even if we overshoot those a little, we're absolutely fine. There is another plane entering their base leg for this runway, but they are behind us. The runway is clear. We're coming in at heading of about 317, so that matches up to 320 near enough. We're not quite on. Going around. Okay, flaps up. And if you're wondering why we just went around, I saw some other asshole on the runway. And if you see that, you don't land. That's not fun. Okay. And we've got our minimum airspeed and our muttered obscenities. And flaps up. So that is the second rapid go-around that we've done on stream. The previous one was for awful weather. That was for somebody going onto the runway while we were on very, very short final. Well, that was exciting. And one of the things that it's always useful to keep in mind for that sort of situation is that going around is easy, recovering from a crash is less so. And let's just get that autopilot back on. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 19 has gone around from landing approach due to traffic on the runway unannounced. Entering downwind. Why are we turning that way? We don't want to be turning that way. Let's just hold this heading. Set up our markers for runway 32 just to make sure that we've got that set up. And making sure that we are not speeding or anything. Okay, let's turn back and try that again, shall we? I'm definitely glad of having been in my calming approach voice, because that was a stressful little situation where somebody was just on the runway in front of us. I may watch the recording back later and find out if there actually was somebody there or if I missaw something. But if you see something on the runway, and you know, you've got, let's see here, an hour and a half left on the fuel. It is a lot easier to just go around and let whatever was on the runway move on and make another approach. Yeah, that was a stressful little moment because, you know, I don't particularly want to crash this plane into whatever random thing that was on the runway directly in front of me without announcing it on the traffic channel. No, they're just scrolling back through the air traffic control log. They, in fact, did announce it immediately after I announced that I was on final to land. They just pulled on and said, I'm taking off now. See ya. So polite. Okay, so there was something there, just being an utter, let's call them unsafe pilot. So we're going to line ourselves up again and make another approach. And I'm going to do some extra announcements on the traffic channel just to make sure that nobody tries that again. We've had another 2 planes come in for a landing. Oh no, one on this runway, one on a different airport on the same frequency, because that's useful. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 19 is on downwind for runway 32. And I'm not going to be doing an autopilot enhanced landing, but I'll be using that for tracking my position and getting a good position of the runway centerline on the map here. And we're just popping along at our cruising speed for now. Oh yes, utter NPC behaviour. Or, you know, possibly just utter PC behaviour. It's just that that one AI pilot was playing a motor hobo. Because the thing about NPCs is that they have to make sense. I am, of course, also going to be starting GMing a Dungeons and Dragons game on Wednesday, so I've got a lot of NPC behavior stuff in my head at the moment, and every bit of media I consume at the moment is doing its best to change what that's going to be. It's wild. Planning a criminal campaign, or Thieves Guild campaign, and I listened to Mackie Messer, aka Mac the Knife, but in German, the original, and that starts to show up as a character in the Thieves Guild in my head. Last night I watched some of the original 1960s Batman, and it was, the first episode with the Penguin, and all of how he was doing his crimes was definitely trying to lodge itself into how this criminal campaign would go, which would be absolutely wild, especially with Mac the Knife there. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 19, turning base for landing runway 32. So, it's interesting watching how, when I consume media while trying to think of something, everything tries to stick in my head. The number of characters that I can tell, various role-playing characters that I've made over the years, that I can tell what I was watching when I did the concept for them, because it's stuck. The various forms of the sci-fi armor, I never take my helmet off sort of character, which was long before The Mandalorian and before most Star Wars stuff had Mandalorians never take their helmet off. This was a Star Wars character, but hers was a Republic drop trooper, also before they'd introduced those into Star Wars, which was in The Mandalorian, whose unit got wiped out, so no, I can't show my face. So, always keeping the helmet on out of trauma. Because, role-playing characters are a good place to put trauma. That's what we make them for, isn't it? And, I know what I was watching when I came up with that. It's actually Red versus Blue, the Halo machinima. They never take their helmets off because Halo doesn't have that programmed in. But no, she was doing it for trauma. Okay, nice long go around, longer. We've got another Cessna that's saying they're inbound to land, but they can wait behind me. Okay. Flaps to approach position, easing back on the speed. Our flap limits are 150 for the approach level and 125 for the landing flaps, which is what that white bar on the aircraft speedo is telling me. That is the area that you can have the flaps down for, and there is the runway, and I can see another plane's lights off in the distance. Okay, and we are 6.8 miles from the runway. And we've got the LNAV showing up on the instruments. So, getting back to 2 hours and a quarter so far on the stream. That's a little longer than I was expecting to go. I planned out an hour 10 sort of flight. I guess the weather conditions were not agreeing there. But, this has been an acceptable length stream, at least for me, and I'm the only one who's actually required to be here for the length of it. Everybody else is allowed to just kind of leave. But here we go. Okay, 5 nautical miles, autopilot off. And I've got the localizer from the GPS. And I've got the glide slope. Flaps to landing position. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 19 is on final approach, runway 32 to land, repeat to land. Runway will be required for landing. Martel 19 on final runway 32. Do you think that was too subtle? Not that I'm actually talking to anything in-game with that little role-playing conversation, but it is a good way to let the frustrations out. Okay, 95 knots is okay. Easing on to the localizer. We're a little bit above the glide slope, but that's okay. We're nicely lined up on the runway. There's the center of the localizer. Not correcting too quickly to get us down towards the glide slope. Not letting that little crosswind push us too far off because we can correct. Here comes the glide slope. That's just lovely. The glide slope is easy to read backwards sometimes, because if the dot is low, that is because the glide slope end position you need to be is below you, not because you are low, which is always fun. And that crosswind is just trying to push us across the runway a little, which is why crosswinds only matter when we're getting into land. We're on the glide slope. 500. There's 500 feet from the ground. What a lovely little canal. Just easing back towards the center line. Easing the speed back to about 85 knots. Watching the runway. Making sure it is clear. There's been no further comments on the traffic channel. I cannot see any planes on the runway. Easing the speed back. We're on the center line. We're on the glide slope. We're on the center line. Glide slope is nice. Easing the speed back. We're on the center line. We're on the glide slope. There's the 1,000-foot markers. We're slightly long. A little bit of rudder. We're on the runway. It's our runway. Nobody else can have this runway while we're on it. Flaps up. Gentle braking. And we've not stopped in time for that taxiway, but that's okay. Double checking that flaps up. And as we taxi out, standby alt power off, anti-ice off. And we pull off the runway. Here, parking brake on. Bundaberg traffic, Martel 19 is clear of the runway. Okay, before taxi checklist, taxi lights on, strobe lights off, landing lights off, seatbelt lights on. Taxi clearance is uncontrolled. Inertial separator bypass, prop RPM to minimum, fuel condition low idle. Attention passengers, we've landed safely in Bundaberg and the local time is 1:26 PM. Please remain seated until the plane comes to a complete stop at whatever ridiculous parking spot they give us, because queuing for the exit in an 8-seater makes you look even more ridiculous than normal. Okay. Let's get to our zoomed in view, and I might in fact pull up the actual airport charts for this and work out where we want to park. Oh look, there's a bus. Okay, no significant aerodrome chart, so let's I think we'll park off to the top right there. Okay. And nobody in the way. Parking brake off. And we taxi along. And since this is an uncontrolled airport, we are basically working to car park rules. And trying to keep track of what markings are leading us where. Some of these taxiway markings are leading us along the taxiway, and some of them are leading us into parking spots. And if that fuel truck starts to reverse, I believe the appropriate procedure for us is to explode. We've got all these little Diamond brand aircraft just parked along there, but we want somewhere a little more comfortable, this is looking more like it. Oh yes, there's a I think that's a Citation jet. That's more like the sort of parking we want. We're important. Yeah, we'll park nose to nose with the Citation, that sounds fun. And just being very careful because... Oh no, that's not a Citation, I'm not sure which type that is. But it's a lovely little business jet, possibly a Learjet. And just for size comparison of how those business jets compare to this bus... yeah, this thing is not as small as you think it is. Like, being a single prop at the front, it feels like it should be more like that thing. It's not. That jet in front of us probably has about the same passenger capacity as we do. But we are being very careful because the shredder mounted to the front of this plane would do a nasty mischief to them, and that would be expensive. And there's the little yellow line, which is where we want to put our front wheel. Okay. Shutdown checklist. Parking brake handle set. Power lever idle. Bleed air heat switch off. Turbine temperature stable. Prop RPM feather. Fuel condition cut, and let that spin down. Lovely. Initial separator handle normal. External lighting off. Seatbelt light off. Attention passengers, this now concludes our flight from the Gold Coast to Bundaberg, and we here at Martel Air hope you've enjoyed your time in our tiny sky bus. Please wait until I've opened the door and you can calmly deplane in an orderly fashion. Our baggage handling services today will be provided by our wonderful passengers, so thank you for not leaving any of your luggage behind. Any personal belongings you left behind as you leave the plane will be assumed to be a present to the co-pilot and enjoyed thoroughly. And on your way out, don't forget that we have our lovely coffee machine for your to energize you before you attend the town of Bundaberg. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay. Internal lighting off. Fuel boost switch off. NG is 0, check. Avionics 2 off. Avionics 1 off. Battery switch off. And fuel tank selectors both off. Shutdown checklist complete. And if we pop outside the aircraft, you can see that something's gone weird there. Let's just reset that camera entirely. But, yes, as you can see, compared to this... I picked that parking spot rather well. I'm pleased with that parking job. But yes, you can see just to scale for comparing the Caravan to a business jet. We're doing fairly well. They're probably a little bit faster and a little bit more prestigious than us. Probably, well, you can tell by the tiny round windows that their plane will have a pressurized cabin where the Caravan does not, which is why we stay below 12,000 feet at all times, unless we've got all passengers on supplemental oxygen, which the plane is not equipped for. It's only got equipment to do that for the pilot and co-pilot. But yes, I delight in these little size comparisons of the Caravan, despite looking like a single-engine little plane, is a single-engine chunky plane. You can see why FedEx likes these more than business jets, because this thing will also run a lot cheaper than that. And yes, for the little... I think that's a two-seater next to us. Isn't it ever so adorable? Just walking around the airport. Oh, that's on low texture mode. Let's just go back to the high texture plane that I've spent all that time on. There we go. Showing off the flags of allegiance nicely there. A little bit bright on that side. Let's go around to that side where we can see the flags a little better. But that will finish up the stream at 2.5 hours for what I was planning to be an hour and a half or so. But I got the timing estimate wrong on this stream. Seems to be one of the catchphrases at this point. So let's continue to not trust my estimate of how long a stream will take. But it's good to know that I can survive a 2.5 hour stream, which bodes well for if I ever decide to do a 6 hour stream. So, thank you for joining us for this flight. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I think at that point we will... call an end to things. I will see you next week.